Hi folks, Johnny Matthew here. Welcome back to the blog. If it's your first time, especially big welcome to you. If you've been here before or it's your first time, you can support the work if you want by clicking one of the big subscribe buttons. And you can also buy me a pint if you want for a £5 or something like that. I'd be very grateful, but of course you're welcome to this for nothing. This is the first blog post back after a particularly long break. We did publish one last week, which was really just a bit of an update and some links. The next couple will be guest posts while I'm writing away in the background, having had a long break because of my mum's illness and subsequent death. So glad to have all that behind us and be moving on, but I'm going to let some other people take the strain just for a couple of weeks. So this is the first guest post, I think, that I've published this time through since we relaunched the blog earlier on in 2024. So here we go. A Fair Society guest post by Chris Perry, a book review by the author. Introduction. This is the first guest post since I relaunched the blog on Substack, and I hope it'll be the first of many. Chris Perry is a former Director of Social Services for South Glamorgan County Council. For those of you, the uninitiated and the non-Welsh-minded among you, the South Glamorgan area is really the substantive big population area in the south of Wales, including the capital, Cardiff. So having run social services there, I can tell you Chris knows his onions when it comes to that kind of work, etc. He's also a former non-executive director of the Winchester and Eastleigh Healthcare NHS Trust, former director of Age Concern in Hampshire, and a presenter of an award-winning current affairs programme on Express FM. But I guess he's writing now really with his broader social policy hat on, informed by all of these things. So he's written extensively in recent years on health and social care, youth justice, and income inequality and poverty. And although the articles have been well received, they've not as yet impacted government thinking as he hoped. Now, Chris has written a book, and there's a link to that, of course, in the text post. It is called A Fair Society in Search of by Chris Perry. It's published on Amazon quite recently, and the book is intended as a catalyst to debate by giving the issues a longer shelf life and hopefully taking them to a wider audience. So this summary is written in the third person by Chris Perry himself. So here we go. A Fair Society by Chris Perry. Chris considers widening income inequality and increasing poverty to be the great social evils of our time. Global billionaire wealth increased by $2 trillion in 2024. That's roughly $5.7 billion per day. That's the increase in wealth. And that's 3 times faster than the previous year. In contrast, the median household disposable income in the UK. So the median household income is if you wrote a long list of everybody's income in the UK, the median, it would be the middle one. So the median household disposable income in the UK in 2023 was $34,500. That's a 2.5% decrease on the 35,100 quid in 2022. So basically, billionaire wealth has increased by 5.7 billion per day, and the median household disposable income for everybody else has dropped. Quote, the NHS and social care are in crisis and in need of radical reform, restructuring and social change based upon a whole systems review, unquote. Social work is undervalued and social workers misused. The utilities, gas and electricity are huge profit making and paying extortionate salaries and bonuses while people go cold. The water boards are failing to keep up with acceptable standards. There are concerns about rising knife crime among young people, and on it goes. A few stats. In 22-23, there were 4.3 million children in the UK brought up in poverty. And 2/3 of those actually had a parent who was in work. 4.3 million kids. In March 23, there was 107,000 children in the care of the local authority in the UK. That's the highest number ever. There's actually 107,317. That's in March 23. In December 23, there was over 112,000 homeless households that were living in temporary accommodation. So they've got accommodation, but it's temporary, and we know that housing insecurity is a massive driver of all kinds of disadvantage and social inertia in terms of people trying to improve their lives. Despite low detection rates, the courts couldn't keep pace with demand, and prisons are bursting at the seams. And finally, 2 million older retired people were living in poverty in the UK in 2024. So it's to this state of affairs that the book speaks. Quick quote from Chris. One cannot address whole systems problems with component level solutions. Unquote. Drawing on years of experience and empirical evidence, Chris sets out in the book to demonstrate that one cannot address big whole systems problems with small component level solutions. He argues that unless government takes steps to reverse the widening income inequality and increasing poverty in our society, then the NHS will simply not keep pace with demand. Government will be constantly playing catch up and cannot go on throwing more and more money at the first aid camp at the bottom of the cliff without putting a fence at the top to stop people falling off. In other words, we need to be treating the causes, not the symptoms, whereas at the moment there seems to be an emphasis on component level symptomatic focus rather than dealing with the root issues. Quote, one cannot address whole systems problems with component level solutions. I've already read that to you. There's a wealth of evidence on the social determinants of health, which has demonstrated the correlation between income and health and is well documented. Just an editor's note here. If you want to read more on this, there's an excellent book called The Health Gap by Michael Marmot. And that has got an encyclopedic coverage of the evidence around the correlation between income and health. So I would strongly urge you to read that as a link in the post. Chris's book, A Fairer Society, considers the causes of income inequality and poverty and the effect on physical and mental health, the quality of life, motivation in employment, demands upon health and social care, homelessness, antisocial behaviour, and crime. So it's a really good wide coverage of the subject. Quote, government should use identified savings and agreed additional expenditure to pump prime a ripple effect of radical reform. Unquote. It traces the changes, the book traces the changes in the public sector over the past 50 years. And Chris has been involved for that time and really knows his stuff around this. And he advocates that government should use identified savings and any additional expenditure that they raise through creative measures to pump prime some really radical reforms, looking at restructuring and cultural change across the public sector on a whole systems approach, and that we need to increase the state pension and tax-free personal allowance to lift people out of poverty and reduce demand on the NHS. The challenge is to get and keep as many people as possible talking about the issues, the causes, and the possible solutions to those problems so that they become familiar, acceptable, and begin to gain some traction. It'll take political will, Chris says, driven by popular demand to bring about real, lasting, and radical change. And the more people who buy this book, I would say, the more likely it is that government will take note and we can use our kind of democratic rights and involvement in a much more informed way. So final thoughts. Chris's wealth of experience and enduring passion for children and families particularly, battling the intrinsic inequalities in UK society today, make this book a must-read. So I really hope that you will read it. You can click through from the blog itself. There's a button there to see Chris's book on Amazon, or you can just search up A Fairer Society in Search Of by Chris Perry. The links, as usual, in the chat. There's a link to Chris's LinkedIn profile and to Michael Marmot's brilliant book on the challenge of an unequal world that's called The Health Gap. It's an absolute beaut. So I hope that's useful. There will be at least one more blog post, and then I shall be back on banging away at the keyboard myself for some good stuff for you guys. So thank you once again for being here, and for those of you who subscribe particularly, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.